Surrounded by 6 hungry lions and holding their cub in his arms, photographer Michael Harrison was certain he was living the last moments of his life. What happened next defied all laws of nature and forever changed our understanding of animal consciousness. The murky waters of the Serengeti River crashed against Michael Harrison's chest as he desperately fought the raging current. The drowning cub clung frantically to his shoulders with tiny, sharp claws, while the man's heart beat so fiercely it seemed about to leap from his chest. Just minutes earlier, the wildlife photographer was calmly setting up his equipment on the riverbank. The spring sun softly illuminated the African savanna, and a cool breeze carried the sense of wet earth and blooming acacias. Nothing hinted at the drama that would forever change his life and overturn scientists' understanding of the behavior of some of the planet's most dangerous predators. Michael arrived at the Ngorongoro Conservation Area at dawn, hoping to capture the awakening of wildlife in its natural rhythm. After 10 years of working as a photographer in East Africa, he had developed an almost infallible knack for capturing fortunate shots. But that day, he was destined for something entirely different than another photo shoot for National Geographic. When he spotted the tiny golden body struggling in the water, his heart skipped a beat. The cub, appearing no older than 3 months, had evidently played too close to the shore when soil eroded by nocturnal rains collapsed under its paws. Now, the helpless creature was desperately fighting the current that inexorably carried it towards the depths. The cub's desperate scream, piercing and almost human, instantaneously shattered all of Michael's professional barriers. Through his years working in the wild, he had consistently adhered to the principal rule: never interfere with natural processes. A photographer should remain an observer, a witness, but not a participant. But at that moment, the instinct to protect the defenseless creature proved stronger. Without hesitating a second, Michael tossed his expensive camera onto the sand and plunged into the dangerous waters. The Serengeti River during the rainy season transformed into a treacherous trap, full of hidden currents, submerged trees, and even crocodiles that might lurk in its murky depths. "I couldn't just watch him drown," Michael later recounted to CNN journalists. "All my human instincts outweighed professional rules. At that moment, I thought nothing about consequences or my own safety, only that I must save this little one." The struggle with the current turned out far more challenging than Michael had anticipated. Every step was hard-won, with water rising at times to chest height, threatening to sweep him off his feet. When he was just meters away from the cub, a submerged log struck Michael hard on his left shoulder, momentarily paralyzing his arm with sharp pain. He nearly lost consciousness from the shock, but the image of the drowning cub before his eyes lent him renewed strength. Finally, he managed to reach the exhausted animal. The cub, weakened by swallowed water and terrified by the elements, instinctively clung to its rescuer. Its tiny paws wrapped around Michael's neck with surprising strength, and its heart beat so rapidly and loudly that the man felt it even through soaked clothes. Now the hardest part remained, returning to shore. The current seemed to gain new strength, striving to drag them both downstream to deeper and more dangerous sections where, as Michael knew, crocodiles dwelled. Each step towards the shore demanded incredible effort, and though the cub's weight was small, it grew increasingly burdensome. What Michael didn't realize as he navigated through the murky waters with his precious cargo was that he was being closely watched. On the riverbank, concealed among tall grass and bushes, 5 adult lionesses crouched. They had come to answer the desperate calls of their lost cub, following its scent and cries, and now tensely observed the strange two-legged creature's attempts to rescue one of their pride. When Michael finally reached the shallows by the riverbank, exhausted and breathing heavily, he looked up to see a sight that made his blood run cold. Before him, arrayed in a semicircle, stood the entire lion pride, not only 5 wary lionesses, but also a massive male lion with a thick dark mane. Their amber eyes were focused on Michael and the cub he held in his arms. Michael froze, realizing the hopelessness of his situation. He was waist-deep in the water, holding the cub, while 6 adult lions, some of Africa's most dangerous predators, blocked his path to safety. Any sudden movement could trigger an attack that would end fatally for him in mere seconds. The largest lioness, evidently the pride's leader, stepped closer to the water. Michael held his breath, expecting the worst. Everything he knew about lion behavior told him that the situation was dire. Lions fiercely protect their cubs, and a stranger was holding one of their young. But what happened next challenged everything scientists knew about the behavior and intelligence of these majestic animals. In the matriarch's eyes, Michael saw neither aggression nor threat. Instead, they conveyed something he had never encountered in the gaze of a wild predator during his 10 years working in Africa: recognition and, seemingly incredibly, gratitude. The cub in Michael's arms started to mew softly, calling to its pride. This sound seemed to break the tense standoff. What transpired next was captured by Michael's waterproof action camera, which he always wore on his chest during fieldwork. The camera automatically recorded the events, creating some of the most astonishing footage of human and wild animal interaction. The matriarch lioness stepped into the shallows, her massive paws causing ripples on the water's surface as she slowly approached Michael. Every muscle in his body tensed, bracing for an attack that never came. Instead, the lioness stopped just a meter away from him and performed something contrary to all known predator behavior. She lowered her head in a gesture that could only be interpreted as a bow. This gesture lasted several seconds, during which the rest of the pride remained completely still, as if witnessing a ceremony of great importance. When the matriarch raised her head, she met Michael's gaze, not with the evaluating glance of a predator stalking prey, but with a direct, conscious look, establishing a connection between equal beings. The cub in Michael's arms became more active, reached towards its mother, and began emitting soft chirping sounds. The lioness replied with gentle snorts, the same sounds lionesses use to communicate with their cubs during feeding and care. "It's okay, little one," Michael whispered to the cub, his voice barely audible over the roaring water. "Your family is here. You're safe." As if responding to his words, the matriarch took another step forward. Michael's heart pounded against his ribs, but something in the lioness's behavior suggested he was not in danger. Her approach was cautious, deliberate, and entirely non-aggressive. What happened next would be analyzed by animal behavior specialists around the world for years to come. The matriarch carefully extended her massive head toward Michael, so close that he could feel her warm breath on his face. For several moments, she simply studied him. Her intelligent amber eyes seemed to evaluate not only his physical presence, but something deeper: his intentions, his character, his role in saving her cub. Then she did something unprecedented in the recorded history of lion behavior. The matriarch began grooming Michael. Her rough tongue touched his forehead, displaying the same caring attitude she would show to members of her pride. This gesture couldn't be mistaken for anything else. She temporarily accepted him as part of her family. Michael remained absolutely still, barely daring to breathe as this apex predator showed him trust that contradicted everything he thought he knew about wild animals. The grooming process lasted only 30 seconds, but the message was clear to every member of the pride. Michael posed no threat. He was not prey. He was the man who risked his life to save one of them. The other lionesses began to approach, their body language more relaxed than aggressive. Even the enormous male lion, who had kept a vigilant distance, approached the water's edge and settled into a resting pose, clearly signaling that he deemed the situation peaceful. Michael cautiously started moving towards the shore, still carrying the cub. The pride parted, clearing his path, their behavior resembling an honor guard more than predators surrounding prey. Reaching the muddy riverbank, Michael gently knelt and placed the cub on solid ground. The reunion was immediate and touching. The lioness mother rushed to her offspring, thoroughly sniffing him, checking for injuries and purring with relief. The other lionesses gathered around, each taking turns to sniff and inspect the rescued cub. Finally, the male lion approached, lowering his massive head and gently touching the cub with his nose. Michael remained kneeling on the riverbank, water dripping from his clothes as he witnessed this intimate family moment with a sense of awe. He should have felt terror, being surrounded by 6 of Africa's most dangerous predators. Instead, he felt privileged to witness something few humans ever saw: genuine emotional bonds within a lion pride. Dr. Amanda Carter, a biologist specializing in wild feline behavior who later reviewed Michael's footage, was astounded by what she saw. What we observe in this footage overturns our understanding of the cognitive abilities of lions, she explained in an interview for BBC Nature. The grooming behavior shown by the matriarch is usually only directed towards pride members. The fact that a wild lioness exhibited such a gesture toward a human indicates a level of cognitive recognition and gratitude that challenges our fundamental understanding of the social intelligence of big cats. As the pride settled around their rescued cub, Michael began to slowly retreat, hoping to give them space and not disrupt their precious family moment. But the lions had other plans. As Michael began to step away, the lioness mother left her cub and made a sound he had never heard in all his years working in the African wilderness. It was not a roar or a growl, but a gentle rumbling call that seemed almost conversational. The rest of the pride responded immediately, rising to their feet and forming a lineup that took Michael's breath away. The lions arranged themselves into 2 parallel lines, creating a clear path from where Michael stood to the acacia tree where his camera equipment was stored. It was an escort formation, an honor guard securing his safe passage from the river. "This is impossible," Michael whispered, his voice picked up by the waterproof microphone still recording every moment. They're escorting me." The lioness mother took the lead on Michael's right, while the massive male lion moved to his left. 4 other lionesses followed at the sides, maintaining perfect distance as they initiated a slow, almost ceremonial procession from the riverbank. Michael found himself at the center of this extraordinary parade, surrounded by 6 dangerous predators, treating him as an honored guest rather than potential prey. The rescued cub, now well enough to walk, trotted alongside his mother, occasionally glancing at Michael with curiosity rather than fear. Every few steps, the cub nudged Michael's leg with its small body, a gesture of familiarity that left the photographer speechless. When they reached the spot where Michael's equipment lay, the procession came to a halt. The lioness mother approached Michael one last time. Her massive head dipped slightly as she studied his face. Then, in a gesture that would later be replayed millions of times on social media and television, she gently pressed her forehead against his. A welcoming behavior lions use with trusted pride members. "Thank you," Michael whispered, not caring whether they understood his words. "Thank you for the trust." The lioness mother stepped back and quietly snorted, a sound of satisfaction and farewell. One by one, the pride members approached Michael, lightly touching him with their noses or rubbing against his legs. Even the huge male lion participated, gently bumping Michael's shoulder with his massive head before departing. The rescued cub was the last to say goodbye. The little one sat directly in front of Michael, lifted its tiny head and softly meowed, a sound surprisingly reminiscent of gratitude. Michael leaned down and gently stroked the cub's head one last time. Both seemed to understand that this moment was singular and would never be repeated. As the pride began to leave, heading for the shade of distant trees for their daytime rest, Michael stood alone by his equipment, soaking wet and emotionally overwhelmed by what had just transpired. His action camera had captured every second of the unprecedented encounter. Later, the authenticity of the footage was verified by wildlife experts, analyzed by animal behavior specialists, and featured in documentaries worldwide. Dr. Jane Goodall herself called it one of the most remarkable displays of interspecies communication and gratitude ever recorded. For Michael, the technical analysis mattered less than the profound truth he experienced beside that murky river, surrounded by wild lions who should have seen him as a threat. He bore witness to what science was only beginning to comprehend: the capacity for genuine gratitude and recognition despite species barriers. The rescued cub grew up under the protection of his pride, and Michael continued his photography work in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. Over subsequent months, he repeatedly encountered the same pride during shoots. Each time, the lioness mother greeted him with a quiet roar, and the cub she had saved, now grown, fearlessly approached his jeep, at times even resting in its shade. Local Maasai guides began calling Michael Kovu's brother, the man who was briefly but genuinely accepted into a lion pride. Tourism operators started offering Michael Harrison tours, hoping to recreate the magic of his meeting, although none came close to replicating the extraordinary trust and acknowledgement he experienced. Dr. Carter founded the Serengeti Research Fund to study the cognitive and emotional capabilities demonstrated by the pride during the rescue. Michael's experience shows that the boundaries between human and animal consciousness are far more blurred than we've ever imagined, she wrote in her groundbreaking article for Scientific American. What we observed was not merely instinctual animal behavior, but a demonstration of values we deem uniquely human: gratitude, honor, and recognition of moral duty. For Michael Harrison, who that day simply hoped to capture some spectacular wildlife shots, the encounter became a turning point in his life. He founded the non-profit organization Voices of the Savannah, dedicated to protecting lions and their natural habitats. His photographs and videos became powerful tools in the fight against poaching and the destruction of Africa's landscapes. I have always respected these majestic animals, but after that incident, my view of them completely changed, Michael recounted in his lectures worldwide. I saw in their eyes something that made me rethink the very nature of consciousness. If a lion is capable of gratitude and recognition, what else are animals capable of, whom we too often regard as beings governed solely by instinct? Michael's remarkable story and the lion pride quickly went viral. Footage from his action camera amassed over 1 billion views across various platforms, and CNN and National Geographic dedicated special episodes to the event. But behind the sensational headlines and enthusiastic comments was a deeper tale about the bond that can form between beings divided by evolution and nature. A year after the cub's rescue, Michael returned to that very spot on the Serengeti riverbank. He didn't expect to meet the pride again, but wanted to honor the memory of the day that changed his life. To his surprise, on the opposite side of the river, he spotted a familiar figure. The cub he saved, now grown and strong, the young lion stood motionless, gazing directly at Michael. He looked at me as if he recognized me, Michael recalled later. And in that moment, I felt a connection that no scientific theory can explain. Pure, absolute recognition. A few minutes later, the lioness mother appeared from the trees with her new litter. She stopped beside her elder son, and both continued to look at the man who once risked his life to save one of their own. Then, in a gesture that even seasoned rangers of the reserve called incredible, the lioness bowed her head in the same bow she had made a year ago. Compassion is a language that needs no translation, Michael said at a TED conference that garnered over 20 million views. That day on the riverbank, I spoke that language, and the lions responded in kind. Perhaps that is our common essence, the ability to feel another creature's pain and act to alleviate it. Michael Harrison's story and the Ngorongoro lion pride inspired researchers around the world to take new approaches to studying animal consciousness. Dr. Robert Jenkins, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, after viewing Michael's footage, started a groundbreaking project mapping the neural connections responsible for empathy in various mammalian species. What happened between Harrison and the lions was not coincidence or anthropomorphism, as some skeptics rushed to claim, asserted Dr. Jenkins. We see increasing evidence that emotional intelligence and social cognition are far more widespread in the animal kingdom than previously thought. The rescued cub, whom locals named Mwezi, meaning moon in Swahili, grew into a strong and healthy male. Although he eventually left his maternal pride, as all young males do, the reserve rangers continued tracking his movements. To their surprise, Mwezi demonstrated behavior unusual for lions. He was repeatedly seen in situations where he protected weaker animals from predators, including an instance where he chased off a group of hyenas from a wounded young giraffe. We cannot definitively claim this is due to his early rescue experience, Dr. Carter noted, but the coincidence is too striking to ignore. Perhaps the early protection experience from a creature of another species influenced the formation of his behavioral patterns. Every year, on the day of the cub's rescue, Michael Harrison returns to the Serengeti riverbank. It has become a kind of tradition for him, a moment for reflection on the fragility of life and the power of compassion. Sometimes, he sits alone, watching the waters flow, remembering that day. And sometimes, when he is especially lucky, the familiar pride appears on the opposite bank, and for several precious minutes, man and lions gaze at each other across the river, bound by an experience that transcends species barriers. The story of Michael and the lion pride continues to live, told from person to person among visitors to Ngorongoro Conservation Area. Local guides show visitors the very spot on the Serengeti riverbank where this incredible encounter took place, recounting the tale of a man who, for a brief moment, became part of the lion family. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.